Today on Ministry Monday, I'm speaking to Joel Kumro. Hi, Joel. How are you?
Hey, Amanda, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Thank you. Thank you for talking with us on Ministry Monday. Now, first off, this episode is going to be airing during the Easter season. Okay, so you made it. You did it. um, what is one of the things that listeners, I haven't even prepped him for this, so this is also good for Joel as well. But what is one of your favorite things to do after Holy Week and Easter is done? Like, what is something that gives you a lot of restoration in life after the Easter, like after Holy Week?
It's actually very interesting you should ask, and I know exactly how to answer this question. So I have two very dear friends, and we were all in the graduate liturgical music program together at St. John's in Collegeville and graduated around the same time. And, we're all organists, music director, choir directors, et cetera. And we've had this tradition ever since we graduated, COVID notwithstanding, of course, but of getting together in our respective cities, and we sort of rotate and we just like really celebrate the octave, like we just get together and we talk about all of the joys and the trauma that we experienced over the last week. And, then we have just a wonderful time and enjoy each other's company and reminisce about all of the crazy things we did in grad school and since then. And so that's usually what I do during the Easter octave, and it's a great joy.
That's great. I think that's a tip we could all do. You just kind of togetherness, community, and then rest as well. So that's great. That's great. Well, okay, so today we're talking about really at the base of it, organ repertoire. Now, listeners, if you're listening, I will admit that the reason that this episode came to fruition is because Joel is going to be offering a breakout session at this year's NPM convention, and a little bit more on that later. But really, more than anything, as Joel and I were talking to prepare for this episode, we were really talking about building a foundational organ repertoire, regardless of your level of ability. Joel, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I personally think that maybe when I was a beginner organist, I thought that would be like high. That's only what high level organists do, is to like create a library, if you will, of things to constantly play from. So, but I really, honestly, I hope you agree, but like, I think it's good for us to say it's possible for every level.
It's totally possible for every level. And I'd love to chat about exactly that today, because what I find is that people, and I've experienced this myself, which is one of the reasons why I came up with the idea for our talk today, and then as well, our talk, my talk that we'll have at the convention in July, is that it can be really intimidating and people are freaked out because it's this big instrument. Everybody's at different levels, and some people are concert organists and other people are, they might call themselves a parish organist or an advanced organist or a pianist that plays the organ, or, somebody that just, does whatever. And the reality is that we've got this beautiful instrument with its giant repertory, one of the largest that we have next to the human voice. I mean, just so much stuff. And that there's a lot of beauty and a lot of musical value in music that may not be as technically challenging as people think. Said another way, you can have music be advanced that may not be as difficult as you think, that people will enjoy, that will enhance your music program, that could potentially even be used on a recital should you be asked to do one. And then on the other hand, we could look at some things that are a little bit more challenging, or more importantly, how to build your program out while you also advance or perhaps refine your skills.
Let's start with you, Joel, actually. How did you begin creating an organ repertoire?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and this is a big part of why I wanted to come up with this talk. And that is because organ is actually a later instrument in my life. Most of my early training was vocal performance and choral conducting. I'm a tenor. You probably heard me singing very loud at NPM conventions. You will hear me singing very loudly again at NPM conventions in the future. Anyway, I kid a bit. But and then I came to the organ much later, relatively. I mean, not for all, but for some. I started playing the organ kind of in my third and fourth year in undergrad, and then I took some time off before I went to graduate school to refine those skills and study more and prepare for a graduate degree in liturgical music with a concentration in organ. So I learned all of this crazy concert rep, and that was really cool. I learned enough to get into graduate schools. I learned enough to put on the requisite recitals at a graduate program. And, during that time, while I was working in parishes, but more importantly, when I moved on from the parish I was at during graduate school to the parish that I'm at now, that has a beautiful European style tracker organ and had a culture of organ repertoire and organ playing. I came here and I was like, okay, I can play and I've got a couple of recitals under my belt, but what on earth am I going to do every week, week in and week out? So though I was aware of some of the repertoire, I found myself having to build this together, and it was incredibly stressful. And once I kind of got over the fact that it was stressful, I started to have a lot of fun with it. And I realized myself that it's not so challenging. Some of the easier pieces that I would present in the beginning of this process, just because I needed to be producing so much music so fast, some of those things have even stayed in my rotation that I have today. And then it's been filled out by other more challenging pieces, more interesting or diverse pieces, newer pieces, older pieces, and then even some things that I played in concerts. And on the other side of that coin would be the fact that I've been able to draw from this program that I put together to put together recitals.
Wow. I think that's a great place to start, because I do think it's so interesting. I feel like the organ is such a unique instrument because people they approach it from so many different levels of use, if that makes sense. I mean, of course we think, oh, the organ, it's in a church. Why wouldn't it be church? And of course we use it in church, but those who study on a high level, we use it as a concert instrument. And then we also, and you didn't mention this, but I think we also have to really shift our focus as pastoral musicians so that we are playing very appropriate pieces, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also that they are acoustically appropriate. A lot of the times concert music is, it can be very loud. It can be maybe super appropriate for concert, but not so much for prelude. So with that being said, how did you start? What are some of the initial resources that you found were very helpful to you?
Yeah, so well, there's so many things, right? What I found was, like, when I first arrived on the scene here, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a number of pieces under my belt. I'm building this repertoire, but I definitely don't have a ton. I arrived, my first weekend liturgically here at Saint Benedict was the celebration of the Most Holy Trinity. And it was like, okay, jackpot, because it's much easier, and I think we could probably relate to this in our hymn planning or in our choral anthems or instrumental music, for other instruments we're putting together. Like when you're in the middle of ordinary time in the summer, sometimes you get those times where it's like, oh my gosh, what on earth am I going to plan this weekend for instrumental music, or what's my prelude going to be? What hymn are we going to sing at offertory, etc. And then it's like, but if you start on the Most Holy Trinity, okay, great, because we've got all these great things. And I remember on that particular weekend, I found this collection that I had. A lot of us will collect, we'll get music as gifts, or we'll collect music from, things that are given to us, or whatever. You get the AGO will have that thing. Look, grab a piece, give a piece, whatever. And so I found this little collection of pieces. It was like a jackpot in my very own library. It was a number of settings based on O Lux Beata Trinitas. And I was like, jackpot. And in there was this beautiful setting of O Lux Beata by Sweelinck. And I had known some Sweelinck music from studying through my graduate program and otherwise. And I was like, okay, sweet, Sweelinck, I can roll with this. His music's cool. I even studied some of these early fingerings. We're going to have fun. The instrument plays it well, whatever. It'll be fun for the audience, at the audience, as it were, of course, to gather the assembly. But and it'll really complement this liturgy. This is what the people here had expected, or become used to. So I was like, okay, sweet. Wow. So I found that and I put those together, and that was like my prelude. And I forget what my postlude was. That might have been something more generic. But anyway, I was like, cool, I themed something really awesome for prelude. Okay. And then, that weekend's over, and it's like, wow, I survived my first weekend here. It went largely maybe decent, I suppose. And then you're like, wow, okay, now what do I do next week? So
Yes.
I'd like to use that collection as an example of several things that I could talk about today, because I found this cool collection, pieces O Lux Beata Trinitas, awesome. The one that I really liked was the one by Svaling. So what do we have to work with there? We have a setting of music based on the text that's pertinent to the feast. We have a notable composer, Jan Svaling, right? And then we have like this collection of other pieces in there too, right? So what I like to do, and what I found tremendously helpful, is to, like, say I like a composer. I happen to like Svaling. I actually don't play a ton of it here, but I play enough of it that it's, people hear it and try to make it stylistically appropriate and all of that. So, you go through, you go to IMSLP, or you queue up the Google machine, and you start looking up repertoire by Svaling. Or on the other hand, you take a text like O Lux Beata, pop that into IMSLP, pop that into Google, and see what other kind of musical settings you can find there. And sometimes you'll find collections of music that have other pieces by the same composer, or pieces based on the same text, or perhaps another text for the feast, and you can start building out from there. Of course, it's much easier for a solemnity or a feast day, but that is like one of the first recommendations I would give, and that's been tremendously helpful to me, and also interesting and fun, because I've discovered a lot of pieces that I didn't even know about.
You mentioned IMSLP. For someone who is listening, what is that if they don't know?
Yeah, so I'm going to forget the acronym. I have a very dear musical friend who unfortunately plays double reeds, but she always makes the joke sorry, that was a joke for all the double reed players. I love double reeds, but anyway, she calls it I am asleep, which it's not I'm asleep. So I can't recall what the acronym is, but IMSLP is amazing. It's this giant database of all of these pieces that are held within the public domain, which means that they're no longer under copyright. People can upload things. People can create their own editions of things and put them on there. And IMSLP is an incredibly, I can't emphasize this enough, an incredibly valuable resource for an organist, for really any musician, but especially for an organist, because there's a tremendous amount of really passionate organists that have put some great things on there. And there's even some dudes and some gals out there that have put together these beautiful editions of things and arrangements of things and put them on IMSLP. So even in some cases, you get some pieces that are from the standard repertoire that are available, these really beautiful editions that are easy to read and available for free, or you can contribute to IMSLP to help, for the cause and all of that. But super recommend IMSLP, imslp.org. Check it out. It's great. You can even search by instrument. You can search by composer. It's great. The more you poke around in there, the more you're going to find.
And it's free, which is always great.
Free. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is.
Huge hit. Well, okay, whether you're looking at IMSLP or looking at other editions, other arrangements, other collections of organ music, what is your stance about music that is manuals only versus manuals with organ? With pedals, manuals with pedals.
Yes, no, that's fine. I am incredibly passionate about this. There is really, really high quality music available, and some really challenging music available for manuals alone. I think that we need to destroy this idea that music for manuals and pedals is overly challenging. And I think we need to also destroy the idea that music for manuals alone is too easy or not challenging enough. There's a tremendous amount of repertoire. And also one must realize that the organ existed for like a huge part of its own history without a pedal board, or without a fully developed pedal board that we know now. So, as a side note, my recommendation to so many organists out there and to many students that I've had is like, don't be intimidated by the pedal board. Send me an email, later or something like that. I'll send you like 5 easy tips, or somebody else will, or, look, the AGO has videos or other people. It's great. Don't be intimidated by the pedal board, but also don't discount wonderful music that's written for manuals alone. And if I may, I would like to make 2 examples for you of really awesome music that's largely for manuals alone. The first one is, and this will be tangentially related to something else we can talk about if we have time regarding concert music, but one must really look at, in my opinion, the chorale partitas of Bach. The chorale partitas, if you have the Baronreiter set, which of course I didn't bring to my office, which is very helpful in this very moment, in number one, you've got that. I've become like a super partita guy over the last few years. My rounds of recitals that I played for, I think the last 3 years in a row, I've had a Bach partita on. And because I just find that a lot of people don't put them on recitals, and it's marvelous music. It's not too challenging. You can take the individual partitas apart and present them in the liturgy. You could present them as prelude or as postlude or something like that. And the majority of the partitas are for manual alone, or that would be most commonly how they would be played. And it's fabulous music. Some of it is really challenging. He's even got a couple of pieces that are like bichinia, so just 2 lines, and it's so exposed and it's so elegant, and it's also so challenging, even though it's only 2 parts. But so one must really look at the chorale partitas of Bach. That it would be one place to go. Also, the Neumeister chorales, if you have the Baronreiter set, which I'm very proud to have. I've worked very hard to collect them. Volume 9, this is a collection of Bach's chorales that was just discovered in the 1980s. Most of them are for manual alone, great music, some familiar chorales that we would even use within Catholic worship. And also another collection that Amanda and I were talking about via email that I've recommended a million times is the Oxford Service Music for Organ collection. I cannot recommend this collection enough. I've used it with students. I've used it when I've done repertoire presentations to our AGO. I just tell all sorts of people about it all the time. What I love about this collection, and I recommend that if you can, go out and buy all 6 volumes, 3 for manuals alone and 3 for manuals and pedals right away. Also, the editions are great, very easy to read, very well done. I don't work for Oxford. I probably should. I should call them, tell them, hey, look. Anyway, just kidding. But what's wonderful is the books come volume 1, 2, and 3, or I think book 1, 2, and 3, and it's graded by difficulty, right? So 1 is pretty easy. Some of the music is like really not very technically challenging at all. They've even got either registration suggestions based on what would be, perhaps appropriate, or they will tell you what the registrations are if the composer asked specifically for them. One thing I love about collections like this Oxford collection and some others that I would recommend is that it becomes almost like, for lack of a better phrase, a gateway drug for repertoire, right? If you find something really cool in these collections, and in a number of them, you're going to find pieces that might also be available on IMSLP. But for example, IMSLP is huge. And when you're directing a huge music program with all the choirs and all the other stuff that we have to do all the time, sometimes you don't have the bandwidth or the energy or the time or, who knows what to be sitting on IMSLP for hours and hours. So to have it consolidated into a rather dog-eared setting of this book like this, you can go through and say like, oh, I really like this piece, for example, I opened up to Edward Elgar's Vesper Voluntary that's in here. This is a fabulous collection. The whole thing's available on IMSLP. I didn't know about it. I was introduced to it via this book. A lot of people don't seem to play any of them if they haven't had this book. And you can get the whole collection, and they're beautiful music. You can use them for Vespers. You can use them for the liturgy, the celebration of the Eucharist, etc. So find really good collections with good editions, and that will help. And again, there's manuals only, manuals and pedals. So that was kind of a long way about saying that, but I would look for a lot of that. Look at the French Baroque repertoire is huge for music for mostly manuals. Huge, just huge, and really challenging in a way that might be different. The French Baroque repertoire may not be as challenging from a strictly technical standpoint. There might not be as many notes, to make a bad joke, as some other things. Although the style of the French Baroque is rather esoteric, and it provides a really nice opportunity for you actually to kind of dive into that a little bit, playing the trills, playing the ornaments and all of that. So I would check that out. The French Baroque, Couperin, especially Couperin de Grigny, a little bit more challenging there, actually quite a bit more challenging, but that sort of thing. And you can find lots of YouTube videos of that music. You can find people talking about how to interpret them and etc.
I want to say also, in listeners, we swear we're not sponsored by Oxford, okay? But those Oxford books, I want to give a tip to the listeners and to Joel actually. So I have used the manuals only book and the manuals and pedals book 1, so much that I actually went to Staples and I had them put it spiral bound. And I tell you, it makes such a difference because it also lasts so much longer then. And when I spiral bound them, I think it cost me under $7. And it has made such a difference in my books. But anyways, yes, I think that's wonderful. I do think sometimes manuals only get a bad rep sometimes, but
it really ought not to. There's just marvelous music. There's collections of music, especially from France, for the harmonium. You know, this was very common in French churches where you would have a grand organ in the gallery. The choir would often be singing up in the chancel or in the sanctuary, and there would be a smaller organ, an orgue de chœur, or, you know, what would be a harmonium, a reed organ. And there's composers like Franck, for example, that wrote these large collections of music that would be for that. And those can be played on the pipe organ beautifully. You've got lots of you can take lots of liberties with your registrations and which stops you use. And again, and even some of them you can add pedal if you wish too, or to make it easier technically. So definitely I want to get away from that whole idea. And I was guilty of this for a long time too. Music is not suddenly not as good because there isn't pedal, and music isn't innately more difficult on the other hand just because it doesn't pedal.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about all of this planning we've talked about. Joel, what do we do if our plans don't go as planned for whatever reason that is? What do we do?
Yeah, I have a huge problem with this even to this day. So I like cause myself a huge amount of stress trying to plan all this stuff, probably more detailed and much more difficult than anybody here would appreciate. But whatever, that's the life. But so give yourself a way out and give yourself a little bit of grace, right? So like you printed the worship aids, they say that you're going to play this Bach chorale prelude or, you know, this Brahms chorale prelude or what have you. And you're just like, you know, let's say, I don't know, it's Thursday at like 4 o'clock and you've got another meeting and then a mass tonight and then you've got one in the morning and then rehearsals all day. And you're like, just not sure if your Bach O Mensch Bewein is going to be ready for Saturday, right? What are you going to do? Have something else ready or repeat something. You know, I found, you know, it doesn't have to be every week, but give yourself a little grace to do that. Or come up with some other idea. Find something for the harpsichord to play on the organ. Find a piano piece that'll work really well. Create your own hymn arrangement. Improvise a little bit. Or this one's really fun. You know, you can go on IMSLP or kind of like a sister site, CPDL, which is for the choral public domain library. Find a piece of polyphony and play that on the organ, which, by the way, would be a legitimate thing to do. You know, a lot of times we would sub out a voice for an obbligato instrument or, you know, do something like that. It's okay. It's fine. Put it on the shelf for next week. If you're going to miss out on your piece that's like really great for a solemnity, okay, play it again next year, you know, but that would be fine. Have a way out. And the more that you are preparing these pieces, the more that you're going to have pieces to draw from as well.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about music in creating your own repertoire for special services and liturgies like weddings, funerals. What do you do to prepare for them?
Yeah, weddings, man. So weddings, you know, it's interesting. It's like I need somebody to do a ministry Monday or you know, a talk at a conference about organ music for weddings for me personally, because I'm just like a little burned out on playing the same stuff. Now, that being said, maybe some of us are playing the same stuff or getting the same requests because the music is practically advantageous to use during a procession. Like Bach, Jesu Joy Man's Desiring, like cool, repeat a section, cut a section out. Bride's going too fast, bride's taking too long, whatever, you know? So there's also a lot of collections out there. There's some good collections and there's some bad collections. Once again, to Oxford, we're not being sponsored. Oxford, ceremonial music for organ. Found that one. Cool. You find some great pieces, just ceremonial music. It's not the usual stuff. It's not just, you know, the Moire Rondeau or something like that. It's some other cool stuff. And then also give yourself some liberty to show your couples. I have found that couples get super excited when I show them music I'm passionate about. When I take them up to the organ loft, and it's like, I had a couple last year that like really loved music. And we have this beautiful organ here, it's kind of a spectacle in and of itself. And I get people, bring them up to the organ loft, and they look at this big green tracker organ, and they're like, whoa, this thing is so cool. And I had this couple last year that was like, what are you working on? And I was like, haha, incidentally, I have 2 recitals coming up, and they're like, play us something from your recital. And I was like, maybe this will work. And then they wanted it at their wedding. And now these pieces are in my wedding lineup all the time. Nice. So that may not have been the easiest way, but it is a way. Also, look for the composers that have great pieces, great collections available. I mean, Oxford is a great place to go. Gerald Neer has a great collection. He has several great collections, and I presented on this with Nick Will a few years ago in Baltimore NPM. We did a new repertoire recital. It was really fun. And I played a couple of Neer pieces. He's got I think it's called the St. Augustine organ book. Yep. And in there, he's got like a really nice, very accessible, in my opinion, somewhat advanced, but I think overall accessible. Practice it for a couple of weeks. You're going to have a lot more funerals in the future. You'll be fine. Get a lot of money, got a lot of miles out of this piece. A piece based on the In Paradisum, right? So it's like, if you have a traditional program like here where you're going to occasionally use or all the time use the In Paradisum, sweet. And if you're not going to use it, you've got a beautiful piece to play anyway.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, we've just clearly scratched the surface on this topic. And so you are going to be presenting on this topic in Reno. So can you give a little preview? If someone's thinking about going to your breakout, starting to think about going to the convention, what can they expect? It's called Repertoire in Context, Organ Repertoire for Liturgy and Concert. What can we expect?
Yeah, so I'm excited to give this talk because it's exactly the talk that I think I would have liked to have gone to many, many times so far. And we'll hit on in a more detailed manner a lot of the things that we did today. I'll give you some practical tips on how to find things, give you more ideas how to do it. We'll talk about additions. We'll talk about how to start putting together things so that you get a nice liturgical year put together. And then, once you get it, how can you swap things out for better things or take them into other stuff? And then somebody asks you to play your recital. Your parish builds a new pipe organ or rebuilds it or gets a new electronic organ, or, the parish down the road wants you to come and play for something. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm not a concert organist. I don't have a repertoire. Yes, you do. So how do you build a repertoire that you can put together, that you can present at another parish, at an AGO members recital, at an NPM members recital, or anything like that, or to showcase something to your parish? So we'll talk about that. I'm going to touch on a little bit the very complex subject, in my opinion, with no clear answer, but I'll give that as a preview, about whether or not these pieces are concert pieces or liturgical pieces, and what, in my opinion, is the difference there. We'll talk a little bit about the judgments that you find in Sing to the Lord, and how that's actually not perfect, but that's not perfect for organ repertoire, but how I use that to interpret selections for the organ repertoire. So that's a little preview of it, and we'll talk about some things like I had already mentioned about manuals alone, going into some repertoire that you haven't seen before, new music, old music, registration, the whole thing. So once again, we probably won't do more than scratch the surface, but I've got a lot that I'm very excited to tell everyone about.
Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about organ registration. Well, we'll just have to come to your breakout session. And I will also say too, that your breakout session is slated to be recorded. So if you are considering, if you want to come to the convention, but maybe you can't make it to Reno, join us for the virtual convention, because you will be able to benefit from Joel's teachings, because it will be one of the breakout sessions during the virtual too. So yay. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your encouragement too on this topic too, making it feel like building your organ repertoire is totally within reason, is something I think too is very attainable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been such a great privilege to be here with you today, Amanda. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I hope it's been helpful to some people. I look forward to seeing you in Reno. Write me if there's something I can do to help you more, because we're all in this together. We've got a beautiful instrument with a beautiful repertoire, and the music really deserves to be played, and ears really deserve to receive it in prayer.
Oh, amen. Thank you.